Just like last week, we have another kind of interruption in our normal kind of Sundays and ordinary time readings and worship. Last Sunday, of course, was All Souls Day, which is a day that means a lot to all of us as Christians, as Catholics, where we do remember certainly and bring to the altar all of our loved ones who have gone before us, but on All Souls, we especially remember all the souls in purgatory. It's a day that the church gathers and just prays for all the dead. But then we get today. Today is the feast of the dedication of the Basilica of St. John Lateran, which I'm sure means a heck of a lot to you guys. But maybe it should. Maybe it should. There are 4 major basilicas in Rome. There is, of course, the most popular one, St. Peter's at the Vatican. There is St. Mary Major. There is St. Paul outside the walls, and then there is the Basilica of St. John Lateran. But only one of those 4 basilicas gets the title of mother and head of all the churches in the world. And oftentimes, we want to think it's St. Peter's, because St. Peter's is where the Pope lives. He lives right next door to the basilica. Also, the basilica is built on top of the tomb of St. Peter himself, the rock. But St. Peter's is not the mother and head of all churches throughout the world. St. Paul's outside the walls, a beautiful basilica. All around the ceiling, right below the ceiling, in St. Paul's outside the walls, you have the portraits in mosaic form of all the popes that we have ever had, starting with St. Peter's all the way to Pope Francis, and when the Lord, hopefully not soon, calls Pope Leo home, his portrait will go up there. You also have the tomb of St. Paul, perhaps the most prolific writer of the New Testament and one of our most revered converts to the faith. But St. Paul's outside the walls does not get the title of mother and head of all churches throughout the world. St. Mary Major is a favorite of many who visit Rome. It was a favorite of Pope Francis. In fact, he's buried there. And one of the neat things at St. Mary Major is it houses the manger, or the crib, in which Jesus was born into. But St. Mary Major is not the mother and head of all the churches throughout the world. It is the church whose dedication we celebrate today, the Basilica of St. John Lateran. And St. John Lateran is an enormous, beautiful, 460-foot long from entrance to the apse church. It's a gorgeous church. And there, over the canopy, over the baldacchino, over the main altar, are the skulls. I love being Catholic. Are the skulls of St. Peter and St. Paul. It has the bones, the relics of St. John the Baptist. They are housed there. It has a huge fragment of the table upon which the Last Supper was celebrated. It also contains the wooden altar of our first pope, where he would celebrate Mass. St. Peter is built into the main altar at St. Peter's, or at St. John Lateran. But it's not for any of these things that St. John Lateran gets the title of mother and head of all churches throughout the world. It's something that you can actually barely see. When you walk into the back of St. John Lateran, when you walk into the entrance, 460 feet away, blocked out mostly by the altar and baldacchino, is a chair. It's a chair. That's why St. John Lateran gets the title of mother and head of all the churches throughout the world. And of course, that chair is not just any chair. It's the cathedra. It is the seat of the Bishop of Rome, and therefore making St. John Lateran not just a basilica, but the cathedral church of the Bishop of Rome, and therefore the church of the world. Just like St. Peter and St. Paul Cathedral in Indianapolis, there's a chair, the cathedra, at St. Peter and St. Paul Cathedral, where only the Archbishop sits. The cathedra at St. John Lateran is all the way at the very front of the church. And chairs are important. There's not many assigned seats in the Catholic Church when you enter a Catholic church. But that chair at St. John Lateran, it belongs to the Pope. And one of the things I love when I walk into classrooms in our school, especially like the little kids, kindergartners, first grade, second grade, is story time. I love getting to read stories to kids. I don't get a chance all that often, but when I walk into classrooms and there's the teacher sitting in her chair or his chair, and all these little kids, just this gaggle of children, are sitting all around their teacher, listening intently as this story is read to them. You can see it on their faces. Their imaginations are engaged, and they're just focused, all in the same direction, all at the words being spoken from that chair. And on a day like today, on this feast day, we get to recall and remember that all of us, 1.2 billion Catholics throughout the world, that we sit all around that chair, the cathedra of the Pope, that we listen intently to the words that flow from the mouth of whoever the Pope is, not Robert Prevost per se, but Pope Leo. That we listen to those words and we gather ourselves in our hearts and minds around that cathedra, around that seat, because from there, the vicar of Christ on earth, the representative of Jesus on this earth, the chief shepherd, gives us our marching orders in the same voice of Christ. We get those marching orders of go out and make disciples of all nations, and do it by loving your neighbor as I have loved you, said Jesus. All of that teaching flows out from there. And all of us, Catholics throughout the world, interiorly are disposed, kind of sitting around that cathedra, that church, that voice, united, focused, all on that direction, hungering for the voice of the one who truly feeds, who truly teaches through the Vicar of Christ, and that is Jesus himself.